On a quiet country road, General Darnell Hayes, a high-ranking officer in the United States Army, was driving his shiny black SUV to visit his mother. With a row of medals glistening on his chest, his uniform was a testament to the years of tireless dedication and fierce battles he had fought to protect his country. Darnell, a tall black man, was proud of all he had achieved. On the empty road, he felt his heart lighten as he thought of the unexpected moment of visiting his mother and her happy smile when she opened the door to welcome him in. But suddenly, his peaceful train of thought was interrupted by the flashing red and blue lights reflected in his rearview mirror. A siren sounded unexpectedly. Darnell, surprised, pulled over and held the wheel, wondering what he had done wrong. His car was completely legal, and he was not speeding. Calming himself, he rolled down his window, took a deep breath, and braced himself for the approaching police officer. The patrol car door opened, and Officer Mitch Carter stepped out, a large white man with a hard, unreadable expression. At first, Darnell thought this was probably just a routine check. But as soon as Carter saw him through the car window, his eyes and attitude suddenly changed. Without a greeting, without a word of explanation, Carter coldly ordered, "Get out of the car immediately." His voice was authoritative but carried unnecessary anger, making Darnell feel a little confused. Surprised and feeling the unnecessary tension, Darnell tried to keep his composure. He looked straight at Carter, his voice calm. "Excuse me, officer. May I know why I was stopped?" But when he did not respond, Carter became even more aggressive, loudly demanding that he leave the car immediately, Carter's hand even reaching close to the gun on his belt. Darnell realized the situation was becoming dangerous, with unexpected pressure and tension in the country he served and protected. Darnell slowly unbuckled his seatbelt, aware of the tension mounting as he opened the car door and stepped out, hands held visibly by his sides. Standing tall in his military uniform, the sun glinting off his medals, he projected an aura of strength and dignity. He hoped his uniform would diffuse the situation, silently signaling to the officer his lifelong commitment to the country they both served. But as his eyes met Officer Carter's, it became painfully clear this was more than a routine stop. Carter's gaze flickered with a cold disdain as he looked Darnell up and down, scrutinizing him as though he were something suspicious. The officer's expression remained hardened, his posture unyielding. Without the standard request for a license or registration, Carter immediately launched into a series of pointed questions. "What are you doing here?" His voice held an edge of hostility, his tone suggesting he had already judged Darnell. It wasn't a question, it was an accusation. Darnell, keeping his voice calm, replied, "I'm just on my way to visit my mother." But his answer seemed to agitate Carter even more. The officer took a step closer, his hand dangerously close to his holster, and sneered, "Don't lie to me! You're not from around here, are you?" A wave of frustration and anger surged within Darnell, but his years of training and self-control held him steady. He kept his gaze steady, resisting the urge to react, even as he felt the injustice of the situation simmering beneath the surface. Around them, the quiet suburban street began to shift as onlookers noticed the tension. A few cars slowed, drivers and passengers craning their necks to see what was happening. People on the sidewalk stopped, some reaching for their phones to record. Darnell sensed the growing crowd around him, their stares, their murmurs, a collective judgment forming about the scene unfolding before them. Carter, oblivious to the gathering crowd, seemed fixated on Darnell. "What do you have in the car?" he demanded, suspicion lacing his voice. "Drugs? Weapons?" Without waiting for a response, he barked, "Step back!" Darnell raised his hands slightly in a clear gesture of compliance, his heart pounding as he saw Carter's fingers inch closer to his firearm. The officer's aggression was unmistakable, and Darnell knew he had to tread carefully. In that moment, the decorated general felt a chilling realization. He was in a situation more dangerous than any battlefield he had faced overseas. Here, in his own country, He was seen not as a man of honor, not as a respected leader, but as a threat. All because of the color of his skin. Darnell's body remained still, his face composed, yet his mind raced. He reminded himself of his family, his duty, and the values he upheld in his career. In his calm, measured voice, he tried again. "Officer, I am General Darnell Hayes. I serve in the U.S. Army." Just when the tense situation seemed beyond saving, the siren of another police car blared, breaking the stifling atmosphere. A patrol car rushed over and stopped right next to it. Out of the car stepped Lieutenant Victor Lee, a senior officer with a resolute expression. Lieutenant Lee's eyes were immediately fixed on the scene before him. General Darnell was standing in the middle of the road, his hands raised high, while Officer Carter stood opposite, one hand still touching the gun at his side. Lee, who had fought alongside Darnell on a dangerous overseas mission, could not believe his eyes when he saw his former comrade in such a humiliating state. Quickly grasping the situation, Lee approached and shouted, "Carter, what are you doing?" Lee's authoritative voice made Carter pause, confused by the sudden appearance of his superior. Lieutenant Lee immediately ordered Carter to step back and take his hand off the gun. Carter, realizing he had overstepped his bounds, slowly lowered his hand, his expression changing from arrogant to confused. Lee approached Darnell, his eyes filled with concern and remorse. "General Hayes, are you okay?" Lee asked, his voice soft and respectful. Darnell nodded, comforted by Lee's presence, but his heart was still heavy with sadness. Even though he had done nothing wrong, even though the uniform he wore was a symbol of service and sacrifice, in that moment he was seen only by the color of his skin. As the crowd around him quieted, Lieutenant Lee turned to Carter, his voice filled with anger. "Do you know who this man is? This is General Darnell Hayes, a hero of this country, a man who devoted his life to the freedom you enjoy. You have treated him like a criminal for no good reason." Carter, now completely silent, looked down at the ground with a pale face, realizing his terrible mistake. In front of the crowd, Lee demanded an apology from Carter. Carter's lips trembled as he uttered the apology, but his eyes did not dare to meet Darnell's. Darnell, with a calm but powerful expression, looked at Carter, as if to send a message that no matter how offended he was, he had not lost his self-respect and dignity. The incident that day left all those who witnessed it with a profound lesson in tolerance, compassion, and the need to overcome prejudice. Darnell, instead of choosing to retaliate, gave Carter an opportunity to learn and grow, emphasizing that people can change if they recognize their mistakes. Lieutenant Lee also reminded everyone of the respect and fairness that everyone deserves, regardless of background, skin color, or social status. This story is not just an isolated incident, but a wake-up call about discrimination in society. To build a peaceful and united community, we need to love and respect each other and be willing to change prejudice. Darnell, in that moment, chose tolerance over anger, and the lesson of his tolerance will spread forever.